This is the Volleyball Coaching Wizards Podcast, covering everything coaching, motivated and inspired by interviews and conversations with some of the world's great volleyball coaches. To learn more about the project, visit volleyballcoachingwizards.com. Now here are your hosts, John Foreman and Mark Lebedew.
Welcome to episode 16 of the podcast. In this show, we take a clip from Bill Neville's interview where he talks about the Japanese setter who was at the heart of the revolution that they created in the 1960s in innovating offense, going with a faster, tempo-oriented system, which was completely different from the pretty much just throw the ball up to the hitters sort of approach that had dominated volleyball before then. Bill not only provides a little bit of history here, as he does in his interview, but takes it a step further to share his thoughts on the three major characteristics of a good, successful setter. So hopefully you'll find some interesting stuff here.
To this day, my favorite all-time player is a guy named Katsutoshi Nekoda. And Nekoda was a setter. I think I like it because he's 5'9", but oh man, he was a magician. And he showed the three things I think make a great setter. One, he was a tremendous leader. I mean, he's charismatic. His teammates like him. He ran that team. Two, he had this tremendous ability to make the right choice at the right time, and in turn, Matsudaira created an offense that had it was what he called a time differential offense, and they did a lot of X's and double clicks and lots of that kind of stuff. And nothing out of the back row in those days, but certainly their play at the net was pretty interesting. So, and it was pretty fast. And Nekoda, the third thing he could do is he could deliver the mail to the right address on time. So he made great choices, and then he was able to deliver. Plus, he had a charismatic leadership ability about him.
I like the combination of elements here with Bill's clip. First, bringing in kind of the historical stuff that I think a lot of coaches in this generation and even maybe the prior generation who don't date back to the 60s and early 70s may not have an appreciation of where the fast offense that so many teams run these days kind of more or less came from. The Japanese developed it to try to beat the bigger teams. And a lot of teams, the U.S. being a prime example, adapted it later on as they saw the success the Japanese were having. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we also get some insight into what a coach is looking for in terms of the person who runs that offense.
Yeah.
And in a lot of teams, basically is the team leader. So you get some – if you're someone who's looking to choose a setter and is willing to go beyond, I'm going to take the shortest player because they're not good for anything else except maybe playing libero, which is kind of the classic case.
Yeah.
And actually think in terms of what is going to make for a good setter who's really going to do a good job driving the team, then I think you're not going to get too much better than these three attributes.
Yep. Yeah, you can go in so many different directions with that. I mean, the 3 points are really crucial points, and I don't think you can ever get away from those three things. And when you're talking about a setter, and perhaps the leadership component is slightly underrated, and perhaps the precision is slightly overrated by a lot of coaches. But the three of them in some combination, I think, are the crucial points for setting. And about with the historical point, the Japanese were the first with Nekoda and Matsudaira. They were the ones who introduced the first tempo attack, which is the basis of offense. So by including sets and attacks with different timing, that's when offense was invented. Before then, it was just setting to different spikers and and playing, just hitting a ball and seeing what happens. So in that sense, I think they invented the concept of offense. I think we can make that argument. And very specifically, Nekoda was the guy who used different hand positions to set different balls to control his hand position as a way of manipulating the block on the other side of the net. So he and his coach Matsudaira, as Bill said, are the ones who began the movement that is now the offense that we see.
Right. Let's kind of take these three attributes one at a time.
Yep.
And let's go in reverse order. Since you kind of suggested that accuracy is probably overrated. I tend to agree. I think a lot of this gets discussed, and is probably why setters do so many block reps. And actually, it comes down to a question a friend of mine asked me a few years ago.
Yeah.
From a setting perspective, he said, if you had to choose, would you take good feet or good hands? And my personal response was good feet, and his response was good hands. And to my mind, it has a lot to do with the accuracy thing. I think you can train somebody to have pretty good hands, but if they can't get to the ball, then nothing else matters. Whereas he obviously took the other philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to be misunderstood when I say that precision is overrated. I don't mean to imply that it's not important, but I think that what sometimes happens is that the precision is, in a sense, the easiest thing to be that can be measured, the easiest thing to measure, and so that's the easiest way to judge the setter. So I think in that sense it's overrated, not that it's not important. To your point, I would also have said feet on the basis that if you're underneath the ball, then you can maximize whatever your technical abilities are, or whatever your hands are, so to speak. So I would tend to favour the feet also. I think with the feet you are more precise.
Right. And to the point about accuracy, I think the other consideration there is hitters can make up for deviations in set position. Maybe obviously less so at the lower levels, but when you get to a point where hitters have a reasonable athletic ability and reasonable experience, then they're going to adjust if the set's slightly inside, slightly outside, slightly high, slightly low. Obviously, you don't want horrible sets, but exactly pinpoint all the time.
I think actually we've missed something that Bill actually mentions, and he says, what's his exact phrase? Delivers
the mail on time
and the right place. And
to the right place.
The timing, we haven't talked about timing as being a component of precision, and I think at some level, maybe at a higher level, the consistent timing of the set is more important even than the consistent position of the set, because they can make an adjustment with to the contact point, but it's much more difficult to make an adjustment to the time. Right.
Yeah. Especially when you're talking fast sets to the pin.
Yeah.
As is, modern in-system offense, where the attacker is leaving before the ball, is becoming released by the setter, depending on the tempo.
Yeah.
Once you're into your approach mode, and to adjust off of that. Whereas, as you say, if maybe it's a little inside, a little outside, a little high, a little low, you can kind of compensate for that.
Yeah.
But that goes, and I think, as you say, accuracy is easy to measure. It's the decision making, which was the second part of the process.
Yes.
That is probably the thing that doesn't get enough attention in this whole this whole trio, because it's not necessarily easy to measure. Leadership, when we talk about that brings in a different dimension and it's looked at in a different way.
Yeah.
But there's no stat for leadership, for decision making. You can't look at the sheet at the end of that. Yeah, you could say hitting efficiency or kill percentage or whatever, but when you look at the stat sheet at the end of the day, it doesn't tell you, well, he should have set this player in this instance instead of that player. I mean, that's, go back on video and analyze it yourself.
I've never been comfortable with the idea of setters decision making because, or discussions about setters decision making, because for so many situations, the setter is judged in hindsight based on the result of the action.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be a backwards way of going about something, because then if you follow that to its even half logical conclusion, the point is if it scores a point, it's a good set. If it doesn't score a point, it's a bad set, which I have actually heard coaches say. I think that decision making firstly needs to be judged, and actually coaches' decision making too, under the conditions that existed at the time that the decision was made.
Right.
So, what's the kind of the reception? Well, who's front row? Who's the blockers? And the list of components to the decision are really huge, and it's really difficult to judge those things other than was it a point or not, which I guess is why they do it.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly in any sort of kind of measurement process, everybody's going to be looking to the end result. But to my mind, it brings up the idea that Julio Velasco expressed in the HB Coaches Clinic last year, and that for any execution, there's going to be two elements. There's going to be the decision, and there's going to be the actual execution. And so you got a 2x2 matrix of possible outcomes. Good decision, good execution, you score. But you could also score on a bad decision, good execution.
Yeah.
Or you could even score on a bad decision, bad execution to just get really lucky. So obviously in the decision-making process, as we're working with setters and training setters, we're trying to take the end result out of the equation and trying to train them to be, as you say, to be considering all these other variables. What are your matchups? Who's the hot hitter right now? Not to get into hot, cold, those statistical discussions. I'll leave that for another day. What's the quality of the pass? What tempo are you on, and all that stuff that hopefully is part of the trainer, the setter development. And I just lost track of where I was going with that. But yeah,
the whole thing is really complicated and difficult to measure, and I think it's even more difficult to measure than leadership, really.
Yeah.
Having worked with Vital Heinen, and he was a setter, so I talked to him about setting and how he judged setters, and particularly the concept of decision making and distribution is how we would normally work with it. And he said that the way that he judged it was he looked at the stat sheet, and the guys with the highest hitting percentage should have the most number of balls.
Right.
And if that is the case, then the setter has done a good job.
Well, my only pushback on that would be traditionally your middles will end up with the highest hitting percentage.
Yep.
But oftentimes they will receive the fewest balls because of the quality of the passing.
Well, I didn't say that the argument is not without its flaws. And I'm sure that when he does look at it, there are nuances involved. But I think that as a guide, it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Well, and it brings up the thing that got talked about a lot, I think, last summer with the U.S. men's team, or maybe it was the summer before, in terms of we want, they made a statement. We want 1/3 of those sets to go to a middle attack, be it the middle hitter or the big.
Yeah.
So clearly, they're taking that philosophy. We know these are the highest percentage attacks, and so we want to make sure, even if it means we're kind of forcing it a bit. I realized what I wanted to bring up, and this goes into the decision making, and also it's something that's come up in a couple of the interviews in terms of talking about the transition from side out to rally in the early days, and it's the idea of fear might be too strong a word, but certainly caution, and conservatism among setters, which we don't often talk about in volleyball, but is certainly an influential factor. It's a lot safer for a setter to set an outside ball to the pin than it is to set a fast tempo ball to a middle, or even a fast tempo ball to the outside, because they're not going to be judged, you made a mistake on that ball if something goes wrong. Generally speaking, it's the hitter's fault. I mean, unless the set's just really bad. But, if you set a decent outside ball, then it becomes the hitter's responsibility to put the ball away, not your responsibility as a setter. Whereas if you goof up the timing or the height of a middle attack, then it's more on the setter, at least kind of the way a lot of people judge it. So it's really easy for a setter to start getting tentative, and especially in crunch situations. And I've seen this happen. A few years ago, I think I was watching the NCAA women's final.
Yep.
In I don't know if it was the fifth set or what, it was the deciding set. It was the final set of the match.
Yeah.
I think it was Cal Berkeley was playing, and just every single ball went to the outside. There was basically no middle attack whatsoever, and it just struck me as this is a setter who's a very good setter, really good setter. Just either she's been told set the ball to the pin to this one player, or she's just taken it upon herself and she's gotten tight and is afraid to do anything else.
Yeah.
And I think from watching it that cost them that match, or at least that set. And it's, like I said, it's not something that we talk about very much, but I saw, and some of the other the interviewees definitely saw, when we went from side out to rally, things got more conservative, just generally speaking, because suddenly if you made a mistake at any time, you're going to lose a point, not just if you were in reception. Whereas, before, when you were serving, you could be hyper aggressive because it wasn't going to cost you a point. You just, okay, go back and side out the next time.
This is completely off the point, but you think that serving is less aggressive now than it was before?
No, not right now. Not right now. Maybe
the very first thing that happened in reality was that people started forcing the serve much more.
Why?
I don't know. I've never followed that argument, but that's what actually happened.
Well, I was talking in terms of
even though there is a greater cost to forcing the serve now than there was before.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There was no cost to it before. No, I hadn't thought of it in those terms. I thought of it just in terms of the offense, because you saw teams go away from the combinations that, and there were other reasons for this. I'm not going to say going to set to rally score was the only reason you started drifting away from running X plays and stacks and things like that, because the blockers were getting a lot better too.
I think that has nothing to do with it. I think the quality of the blocking is the biggest reason.
Yeah, fair point.
The quality of the blocking is the biggest reason, and a fast ball to the outside is not a low. It's not a low risk.
No,
action. It's actually a high risk action.
But that took a while to develop.
Yes. But I would say the offense is now a higher risk than they were before.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
this is the reason why you see setters that are not as precise, or at least not as precise as you remember setters were in the olden days, which of course is a whole other point.
Yeah.
But
all right, let's talk about the leadership side of things.
Yeah.
It's something that when I was thinking about this, from your own perspective, when you were at Berlin, you had two decidedly different personalities for setters.
Yep.
Kavika was in charge, vocal, emotional, energetic. And then on the flip side, not so much. So what was that like for you and for the team?
Kavika was vocal and energetic, definitely. He saw himself as a leader very, very specifically. But I don't think that that Basti in this situation was really less of a leader. He's also he was a competitive guy. He was a hard worker. He wanted to win. He was an aggressive guy. The difference between them, I don't think, was in leadership as much as it was in just vocalness.
Right, personality.
Kavika had a really large personality, and that was just part of who he was, and it's a big part of his playing the game.
Right, and I brought that up because Neville talks about the charismatic leader.
Yeah,
and I think maybe that can be interpreted in some different ways, and as you say, there are going to be personality differences, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the team is any less willing to run through a brick wall for that setter. To Bill's point.
Yeah. I think the biggest leadership attribute that a setter has to have is that the players, this is probably no different from the coach, is that the players around the setter, around the coach, have to always have the confidence that the setter has the solution to the problem.
Right.
And whatever that problem is. So if we're not able to side out, then the players look at the setter, the receivers instantly feel calm that the ball doesn't have to be better than perfect. The spikers know that the next ball will be A, the correct choice, and B, in the right place, and has that, I guess, calming influence on the group.
Right.
It doesn't have to be calming, but
I was just going to ask, was Kavika calming or was he firing up?
Both. I mean, in different moments, he wasn't an aggressive. He's not an aggressive guy. He never gets aggressive with his teammates. For example, he's
right. True.
The vocal guy. So
yep.
He's revving up, not
screaming at. Yes.
Not screaming at. So that's different.
But I think that brings up the important point about the visual of the setter.
Yeah.
And I think this is where a lot of young setters probably need the most work, is how they project.
Yeah.
Because like you say, after every play, before the next serve, where's everybody looking? They're looking at the setter.
Between every rally, all the players on the court, particularly in inside out, in reception phase, every player looks at the setter.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas the coach can, to a degree, rant and rave on the side and people don't pay attention, which can be, because coaches affect the mood of the team, absolutely. And coaches can make a team more stressed and less able to play than by their actions and their words. And this is one thing I think that doesn't get talked about very much when you talk about emotion and those things. But that's an aside. But the setter all the players look at the setter between every rally, and probably all the players on the other side of the net look at the setter too, to try and get a clue what he's going to do, and how he or she projects themselves. It's really important part of the game.
True. Now, do you do any specific work, or maybe the better question is, what sort of work do you do with setters to get them in that position where they do project the confidence and the stillness or whatever is required in the circumstance?
It's just a constant work of reminding them, hey, guys are looking to you. They're looking at you. They need to feel that you can help them, that you're going to help them, and that's the beginning. That's the beginning point of it, and they just have to keep working on it.
Right. All right, we're coming down on time. Any things that we didn't hit on? Any final points?
No, I think to summarize the three components of the setter's role, I think are important: leadership, decision making, and quality. We do include precision and timing, and I think setter has to be judged by all three, and maybe at different levels and different moments in the season and the career. One has become slightly more important than the other, but those three things are the three things.
All right, this is going to extend the discussion, but let me ask the question, because I think it needs to be part of it. What characteristics would you be looking for in terms of identifying a setter candidate? Yeah, when we're talking at the high school age group, teenagers, whatever, and you're saying, okay, we need to find a kid that we can develop. What sort of attributes are you looking for?
It's a long time since I've done that. I'm not sure I know really the answer to the question, but probably it would be something about the personality. I'm not sure I could tell you what it was. In fact, I'm sure I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it would be something about the personality, and then something about the technical level, and probably those two things close together.
Okay. I would probably mix in athleticism, because I think oftentimes your setter is one of your best athletes, especially at the lower levels. And part of it is the mentality, but part of it is maybe the work ethic or the psychology or something that goes along with it. But good setters are oftentimes the strongest athletes in the team, and not necessarily the biggest, strongest, highest jumpers, but you could tell that they put in the work. They move well, that sort of stuff. So, all right, we'll wrap it at that.
All right.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For show notes and more, visit volleyballcoachingwizards.com/podcast. Got an idea for a future episode or want to ask a question? Send an email to podcast@volleyballcoachingwizards.com.